we drive 2,500 kilometers. So compared to in gasoline equivalent, it would be like 700 kilometers on a liter of gasoline. And with this, we also want to emphasize the importance of hydrogen in the energy transition. So it's very nice to be here. Every year we race in the Shell Eco Marathon, in which we actually pretend to be a city car, and every round we need to stop. So we also use regenerative braking to do this as efficient as possible. And it's very nice to be here. I look forward to it. Thank you.
All right, so that was the first hydrogen team, and we've actually got a second hydrogen team here, Forze Hydrogen Electric Racing. So, Mark-Jan, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Joost. Hi, I'm Mark-Jan. I'm the team manager of Forze Hydrogen Electric Racing. So at Forze, we build and race hydrogen electric race cars in order to show the world that hydrogen can power our lives. And we think this is needed because people in the Netherlands also are relatively unaware of the potential that hydrogen has. And racing is the perfect sport to show this because it really pushes the technology to its limits and thereby shows what hydrogen can do. And at Forze, we've been doing this for years. We started off as a dream team in 2007, first started off with karts and built the first full-size hydrogen electric race car. Eventually moved on, and last year we became the first hydrogen electric race car in the world to ever beat petrol-powered cars in an official race. So I think in that way, that's the perfect way to show that hydrogen can be a great alternative to fossil fuels because fossil fuels are running out. The Earth is warming up. We need a green alternative. And I think hydrogen can be that alternative because hydrogen is the way to store green energy cheap and efficiently. And especially in mobility, which is what we participate in, of course, it is very promising. You can refuel a hydrogen car in less than 3 minutes. And with one hydrogen tank, you can drive back and forth to Paris. So yeah, that's very promising. And that's why we, as Forze, believe that the future should be hydrogen. And not only that the future should be hydrogen, but also the future can be hydrogen. And that is why we build and race the world's fastest hydrogen electric race car. Thank you.
All right, so we've already got some different takes on the future of hydrogen there. Let's see another view, the solar team.
Yeah, hello, I'm Georg. I'm the structural engineer of the Vattenfall solar team, and we are building a solar racing car. Our team consists of 17 people who are all working full time, and we are designing and building our solar car in 1 year. And at the end, we'll have a race in Australia, which is more than 3,000 kilometers, where we go with our solar car from north to south of Australia, which is a pretty long distance. And with that, we show every day, we try to find new solutions to, most efficient solutions to beat other teams, and they try to do that as well. And with that, we show what is possible. Building a really efficient car in terms of aerodynamics, in terms of structures, and also electronics. And we also think that it's really possible, and we show it that it's possible to have a car riding on solar energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Georg. All right, so the last team, Hyperloop. Peter.
Hi, thanks, Joost. My name is Peter from Delft Hyperloop. And as Delft Hyperloop, we saw the mobility needs to change because the fossil fuels are running out, just as Mark-Jan said. And also, we don't want to spend these hours and hours just to get to the country next door. So it's time for something new. And that solution is Hyperloop, sorry. Of course, Delft Hyperloop as well, but the solution is Hyperloop because it's both very fast and also very energy efficient. The Hyperloop vehicles, or as we like to call them, pods, they travel in a near vacuum tube. So there's almost no air inside the tube. So there's also almost no air resistance inside the tube. Second, the pods propel, so they accelerate and decelerate with linear motors, with magnets. So when they decelerate, they also regenerate energy. And last but not least, we don't use wheels. So we use magnetic levitation, so there's no contact between the pod and the ground. So there's no resistance there as well. So these things enable the Hyperloop to really reach high speeds with minimal energy. And at Delft Hyperloop, what we do, each year we produce a prototype that is ready to be implemented and upscaled for the full world, so for the world. And we do this by innovating each subsystem to make it more reliable, more energy efficient, and more scalable, sustainable. So we make the Hyperloop ready for the world, but also we make the world ready for the Hyperloop by researching different safety topics, but also where the first track of Hyperloop would be in Europe. And also we organize the European Hyperloop Week, which is a platform for Hyperloop for all the involved partners to discuss and share knowledge about the Hyperloop, but also there's a competition for student teams. So with Delft Hyperloop, we will compete with other student teams around the world to show that we have the best prototype. So that's our contribution to the development of the Hyperloop, because we think the Hyperloop is the future of mobility.
All right, so you've got 4 amazing student teams here. I think it's time to get started with the debate. I have some questions and some statements here that we will be discussing. And for the people at home, you can send in new questions in the chat, and I will get them on my screen here live. And then if it's an interesting question, who knows, maybe we can discuss that one as well. So let's start off with the first statement. It's one I think you can all agree on, but maybe you have a different answer to it. The statement, in 10 years, all combustion engine cars are replaced by electric cars. Mark-Jan, I see you nodding. What would be your response to this statement?
Well, I think the most combustion engine cars are, we're already seeing people are moving away from, companies are moving away from investment in these cars. If you actually look to, the crown of motorsports, let's say Formula One, Honda already pulled out last month because they want to invest in greener energy sources. And we see that more and more that also in the industry, but also from the consumer's perspective, people are moving towards greener alternatives. So I think definitely in terms of new cars, in the next 10 years, we'll probably only see hydrogen-powered and maybe electric vehicles. But I think maybe in the second-hand market, combustion engine cars will still be available, but we'll definitely move away from that side.
Okay, Sid, maybe you can explain a bit more, because you mentioned hydrogen electric cars and battery electric cars. What is the difference between that exactly?
Yeah, of course, they are both electric cars. Maybe for people that won't know it, but actually a hydrogen car is also an electric car, and it only, it really depends on where you get your electricity. In a battery electric vehicle, you store it in a battery, and in a hydrogen electric vehicle or fuel cell electric vehicle, you make hydrogen with the electricity, and in the car you store the hydrogen and you make electricity again in a fuel cell. And I definitely agree with you. I believe in the climate accord we said in 2030 the last internal combustion vehicle will be sold. So there definitely will be some fossil fuel powered vehicles still left, but mostly in the second-hand market, because of course no one wants to buy the last internal combustion vehicle. You must feel like a dick when you're still shopping this when 99% of the cars sold will be electric. So I think this really is inevitable.
All right. Any other response maybe from?
Yeah, I can agree. I think we are moving definitely towards the electric cars, and they are so much more efficient. Also, if you have we often experience that especially here in the Netherlands, we don't drive that far, and for that, electric cars are really perfect actually. And I think also solar energy can have a big contribution there as well. Yeah. Okay.
On the other hand, Peter, I mean, cars, isn't that outdated? Shouldn't we all be driving our Hyperloop soon?
No, I don't believe so, because if you want to go to your parents, for example, that live 10 kilometers away, the Hyperloop wouldn't be that efficient. The Hyperloop is more focused on long distances. So I don't think the Hyperloop will exclude all other cars, electric or combustion engine cars. They're not like the same field of usage.
Okay, so we can all agree on the first statements. In 10 years, we'll see way less combustion engine cars. All right, maybe the second one is going to be evoking a bit more of a discussion. The technology I am working on is ready to be widely implemented in the mobility sector. Now we have, 4 student teams, and I think you're at the edge, the cutting edge of technology. So this might be a bit different. Start off.
I think it is possible. You actually can see that it is possible to implement it because there's a company which is, I think, also invited tonight, Lightyear, who's already building electric cars using solar energy. And also for other solutions, not just here for in the Netherlands, but also in different parts of the world, you can have solar energy, for example, in the more hot areas where there's a lot of sun, but less money perhaps. You can have solar energy really free and all day long, and that you could also use to drive wherever you want, basically.
Okay, but do you then see solar energy as like on top of, let's say, a battery electric car, for example, or do you think a car can actually drive on only solar energy?
At the moment, I agree that it's mainly on that you have an electric car on battery and you supplement that with solar cells. But I think if we, as you see, our car is, okay, it's of course for just one person, but throughout the day, it's driving all day just on the solar energy. And it's definitely possible. You can see that with the car we are building. And for that, you also need a really lightweight structure. And of course, there are compromises. And I agree that at the moment, we don't have like the car that everyone is used to, where there are like four more persons fitting in there and still riding solely on solar energy. Especially here in the Netherlands, you also don't have that much sun, but even if there are clouds, you can still get actually quite a bit of electricity from solar cells still.
Okay, because I agree with you that I think that solar energy is a great form of energy, but the problem I see with it is that it's very flexible when the sun shines and when it doesn't. And also, as you say, in some areas in the world we have less sun, in other areas we have more sun. So in that case, I think hydrogen could come in as a perfect solution because it could store the green energy there's actually received with these solar panels. As when you drive a car, you need the energy when you want to press your gas, and when you want to, for example, move faster, you can't wait for the sun to get shining. So in that sense, I think it's very important for mobility, in order for it to be feasible, that you have an energy carrier. And I think for that you need solar energy could be a secondary energy source, but I think for a primary energy source, something like hydrogen would maybe be more useful.
But you mean somewhere you also need the energy to come from, and as I understand, you still have to, often the energy to create the hydrogen is also like, from where do you usually take that? We can basically, the advantage of solar cells is that you have it during the day, unfortunately not at night, all day long. And of course we need a battery in between to store that energy, because for example, in the morning you want to drive, but all midday long you probably just work and you don't drive, but it's still charging. And if you have the battery, then you have, you can accelerate whenever you want. So you still store the energy for when you need it.
And are you then mostly focused on like just the normal city car that we now imagine, or are you really focused on more off-road? I can imagine like a solar car driving through an American desert or an Australian desert and really being useful. But when like a solar panel also has its own energy payback time, and when I'm in Holland, my my car will mostly be in the shade, will be in a parking garage, will just stand still. And I think like when I'm next to a building, I would rather have my for example, then if it's an electric car, my electric car plugged in with a solar panel on the roof, than my car standing in the shade with a panel on there. Or maybe you want to on a large scale solar field, maybe it's way cheaper to produce solar energy. We can make from the solar energy, we make hydrogen and put this in our car. How do you see this technology?
Yeah, I also agree on that one, that you have to also rely, you can use solar cells not only on your car but also somewhere else to get the energy from. And using hydrogen as a basically battery to store the energy from the solar cells, for example, that is definitely an option, I think. But if you, it really depends. You were mentioning off-road. We actually don't go off-road. We ride in Australia all the way on open roads, and it's actually a certified car, so we are allowed to drive there. And for just one person at the moment, we are designing the car. You can see that it's driving the whole day through. And if you mention then something like here, the Netherlands, it's maybe standing not all day long in the sun of Australia, but you still, what I mentioned earlier, you still have energy coming from the solar cells, even if there's a cloudy day or if there's a little bit of shade.
Yeah.
And with that, you can still charge then all day long, except perhaps if you park underground. And from there,
if you say charging, you mean charging a battery? So then it would be a battery powered vehicle, right?
Yeah, basically, yes.
So if you, for example, talk about battery powered vehicles, which of course we also with Ecorunner are more looking towards the hydrogen side of it. I think the electric, of course, you can store it in a battery, but batteries have limited capacity. That's also what we see with battery-powered vehicles on our roads at the moment. They can drive more than, let's say, 400 kilometers. And I think also when you look to an environmental perspective, the batteries have still some downsides. Let's look to the metals they're using for the battery. So if you say you provide a green alternative with this solar energy that is directly stored into the battery, how do you look towards that?
Towards the sustainability, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, actually, we also look into different alternative ways of batteries. There are the standard lithium-ion batteries, which I guess everyone knows. They are the ones like you mentioned. They are not the most sustainable one. I don't know exactly which ones we are looking into, but I know that they are actually we look into different really sustainable batteries, which is also encouraged by the regulations of our ways we'll be participating in. That's a big part of it. And so on that part, we're also going more towards sustainability. But for a big car also, I would definitely agree that it might be a possibility to store that in a hydrogen solution that you perhaps could provide.
We actually got some questions about this that match perfectly. Is there any reason for hydrogen and solar not to be implemented together in a vehicle? For instance, is the space requirement of a battery competing with the hydrogen storage? Now, I'm not quite sure we need the solar team to answer this or hydrogen team.
I would actually say that when, because of course we also need battery electric vehicles. It's definitely, will never say that there's something wrong with this, but I think in combination with a solar panel, actually a battery electric vehicle would be more likely, because when a solar panel, of course, makes electricity, and then we would have to make this electricity inside of the car into hydrogen in an electrolyzer, store this hydrogen, and then again in the car as well make electricity again. And I think definitely when you're combining it with a solar panel, battery storage is more likely. And
I think when you talk about hydrogen, indeed, a hydrogen-powered vehicle is a vehicle that where you put hydrogen in and then convert it into electricity. And it's not a vehicle where you use electricity from the solar panels to convert into hydrogen. That's the other way around. So I think in that way, it wouldn't make sense to do it in the vehicle actually, especially since hydrogen can perfectly store energy. It doesn't go away if you just do it outside the vehicle. So that's why currently also in a lot of places in the world, especially in the Middle East currently, a lot of places where they just with the solar energy directly convert it into hydrogen, and then this energy that is very efficiently converted at a very large scale in, for example, a desert where there's a lots of sun, and then you can have this cheap, very green energy, put it in the hydrogen, and then drive that hydrogen. And I think in that way, it can be a very useful application.
Okay, so we already noticed some differences between the battery electric and the hydrogen electric. There's some tension there, I would say. Would you say that these two technologies are competing? This is actually also a follow-up question.
It's really, it's just, it really depends on the solution. I think the biggest problem for hydrogen is still one, it's a bit expensive. So we need a lot of upscaling, and fuel cells will make the same learning curve that battery electric has already done. And there's an efficiency loss, of course. So when we just store this, battery is very efficient in storing electricity. And when you make hydrogen and again, make electricity, you will lose some energy. So I think for actually more what we see now, like in the cars we see driving today, battery electric is more likely. And I think especially when you're more on the long haul and heavy transport, that's really where fuel cells get more interesting, because the fuel cell is actually the most expensive part of the fuel cell car, and the battery is the most expensive part of the battery electric vehicle. So for example, I've got an electric truck and a fuel cell electric truck, of a battery electric truck and a fuel cell electric truck, and it can drive for 250 kilometers. Then I want to double this range. And for the hydrogen electric truck, it would just mean, okay, put an extra hydrogen tank in, this is not so expensive. But for the battery electric truck, I would have to double my battery. This is very expensive. Again, the battery is the least sustainable part as well from the truck, so this is a problem. The battery is very heavy, so there's really, it's depending on the solution, like how much do I need to drive, how important is it that I've got this long range. That's really all. There are a lot of factors, really depending if you want to choose for fuel cell electric or battery electric, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I agree completely with you, because you say fuel cell electric and battery electric doesn't have to be competing, but in the end, when we look towards, let's say in the future 2030, people have to choose to buy a vehicle, and they can buy a fuel cell electric vehicle or they can buy a battery electric vehicle. So that seems like competition. And I think also when you say like, well, currently on the short distances that we drive, maybe a battery electric vehicle has the advantage. I think you can't really say that, because you state that indeed there's a percentage, a loss percentage when you convert electricity into hydrogen. But I think there are many ways to get this percentage back. So it is about the price of the electricity. So when you convert the electricity in places in the world where the energy is, let's say, 3 times as cheap as over here. So when we talk about solar energy, for example, we can see that in the Sahara, yeah, it is 3 times as cheap as over here. And then you store it in hydrogen, then a 20% loss is nothing. It may even be cheaper to drive hydrogen over here. So I wouldn't say that.
Actually, I would really recommend listening to the Waterstof podcast that we do with Ecorunner, because actually we discussed this as well with Ad van Wijk, a professor from the TU Delft as well. And you see now in the Sahara that actually solar power is like it's under the 1 cent per kilowatt hour, which is crazy cheap. And
yeah, it's cheaper than, for example, nuclear energy or coal energy.
And for example, and transporting energy through electricity is very it's a difficult process. And like transporting energy in a molecule, like for example, in natural gas, we've done it forever. It's just a big tube. And transporting hydrogen it's 10 to 20 times cheaper actually than electricity. So especially for getting energy like in places where we've got a lot of solar power, but also like offshore wind. The further we go offshore, the better the business case becomes for making hydrogen of this green electricity actually. So I agree.
So we've now focused on the difference between hydrogen electric and battery electric. There's obviously still a bigger debate going on about the electric at all. Actually, we got a question about this. There is a Danish shipping company that stated that hydrogen and batteries are currently not a viable solution for the shipping industry. They are focusing on ethanol, something else, and ammoniac. Would one of the panel members be able to convince them otherwise?
I think I can. When we're talking about ammoniac, then we're talking about hydrogen.
Okay,
because
so
ammoniac is made from hydrogen, and we see now actually the biggest consumer of hydrogen in the world is ammoniac production. We've got Yara, a big Dutch company in Zealand, that are actually making fertilizers of ammoniac, and they are the biggest hydrogen consumers. And now we're still making this from steam methane reforming. So with steam, we split methane into hydrogen and CO2, and we want to do this in a green way. And green ammoniac is a hydrogen product. So I think this is really not a battle, at least between still how to use this hydrogen. Of course, that is a question. I think ethanol, maybe is talking about bioethanol as well, or and then you're talking about a biomass product or a biogas product, and that's definitely also a viable solution for some areas. But you see, when you're talking about molecules, and sustainable molecules, it's always like a biomass product or mostly a hydrogen product. And I think biomass is needed in so many places, and it's a solution for so much things. But like the efficiency of making biomass is the efficiency of electrolysis, and it's totally not efficient. So this can't solve the entire problem, and they have to coexist. And it's the same within the built environment. For heating our homes, it's we might need biomass for in heavy transport as well, and a lot of these areas. Also for storing energy, I think they really have to coexist. They're also not really, they're somehow battling, but
yeah. Also, I think the question is about shipping, and I think also in shipping there are already parties who are looking towards this hydrogen solution. So, for example, the Olympic village in Japan is completely powered by hydrogen, and they actually ship that with a hydrogen-powered ship.
Yeah.
And currently, I think that's partly combustion, but in the long run, there are also lots of companies investing in the fuel cell solutions also for ships. So I think that's definitely an option.
Okay, well, that allows us to get back to the actual statement we were talking about the technology being ready to be widely implemented. Peter, Hyperloop,
Yeah,
we haven't really been talking about, your area of expertise.
Yeah, it's kind of different, but to say that the Hyperloop technology is ready to be implemented, I think the technological part, yes, it won't take very long for the technological part to be actually ready to be tested on really full scale. Politically, it will take quite some longer because, especially in Europe, when you travel huge distances, you'll cross borders. So you have to deal with multiple governments working together in order to build the tube, but also to regulate safety issues and border control, etc. So I think the political part of the implementation of the Hyperloop is the biggest challenge right now.
And how do you look towards the infrastructure costs? Because of course for Hyperloop you need quite a big infrastructure in order to get your pods.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. So also that's where the governments as well come in, because there will probably not really be an Hyperloop company funding all the infrastructure because it's quite expensive to build huge vacuum tubes. So for the government, it's really important that they also be a part of the implementation of the Hyperloop, also within providing funds as well. Yeah.
And do you, for example, think that like the big, I think maybe your competitors in the future will be like airlines, especially. And don't you think that like post-COVID, maybe some big airlines will say, okay, yeah, fuck it, this continental flights. They are the worst actually, because we're burning all this fuel, only getting this airplane in the air for the small distances. That they will maybe think, okay, we're gonna have to recover from this COVID crisis. Let's do this in a sustainable way or something.
Yeah, definitely. They will. Also, the airlines. For your first question, is the big alternative, like short haul flights. So, for example, Amsterdam, Paris, Amsterdam, London. That's where the Hyperloop comes in and is really, really effective. So yeah, it wouldn't be a weird thought that airlines also come in and collaborate with the Hyperloop companies. Yeah, sure. Yeah, because no one really wants to go back to the flying as we did. Yeah.
And what do you think are the biggest ways in like the government should really take into this? Is it like funding, or I can imagine like with the kerosene, they aren't even paying taxes for it. So I can imagine what are like the big steps that the government you think should take?
Yeah, well, as I said, government is really important for safety regulations, as their passengers. Well, the passengers are like persons, so yeah, they're like responsible for the safety of the passengers. And they have to make the regulations as well. So that's going to take quite a long time. That's what we think. And that's where the government has a really big role to like do it as fast as possible. But as you said, also the funds and the tube has to be on land. So that land has to be available for the Hyperloop company. So also the government needs to maybe check with the landowners where they want to build the Hyperloop tube. Yeah.
Nice. And I'm still kind of wondering how you think. I don't know if you know how this is with like the infrastructure costs, because if you think about flying, you just have an airport and you can fly to every distance where you want. Yeah. But with a Hyperloop, you have to have a tube towards every city you need to go. And I think in that case, you could say that flying could be more efficient. And I know, for example, that Airbus is investing in hydrogen planes at the moment. And how do you see your technology, Hyperloop, competing with this kind of technologies in the future?
Well, especially when you talk about the future, then definitely the Hyperloop would be more energy efficient. That's simply because, as I said, it levitates and there's almost no air pressure. So you wouldn't really can compete with that. But you're right about the initial costs. They are very high. The tubes have to be funded. There's advanced technologies in the tube as well. So yeah, that is quite expensive. Yeah, but in the long run, in the future, then that's when the Hyperloop gets really efficient and also cost efficient.
Yeah, okay, but these costs, of course, towards the infrastructure also goes into the cost of traveling, and I can imagine that these high pressure tubes or low pressure tubes, sorry, would also it would take quite some maintenance. So do you think it is a feasible solution? Because like, what would the cost be if you would travel, let's say, from Amsterdam to Paris with a Hyperloop?
Yeah, well, the exact numbers of the eventual implementation of the Hyperloop are unclear, but it's really proven to be a technology that is highly energy efficient, and also maintenance, as you were talking about maintenance. As you can imagine, you don't use wheels, you don't have rotating parts in the Hyperloop, so you won't have contact, parts that have contact with each other, like really moving, just like wheels do. So that also brings the advantage of low maintenance. So you don't have to maintain, put a lot of effort in the maintenance of the Hyperloop structure, as there's no touching and really moving parts.
And how do you look towards the safety concerns? Because it's actually quite funny. Like 2 years ago, I did my my bachelor thesis at Delft Hyperloop. Cool. And then I had a questionnaire where it came out actually that quite a lot of people are still concerned about the safety, and like a Hyperloop could be a very easy spot for, let's say, a terrorist attack or something. So and if you would get pressure in such a tube when you go with 1,000 kilometers, it would have a catastrophic would cause into a catastrophic event. So how do you think that would be in the future? Yeah,
well, for safety regulations, we see actually two possible outcomes. One is that there will be emergency stops every like 50 kilometers, so which is like a split of the tube. And then if the Hyperloop pod has an emergency, then it could go into the side tube and then come to a full stop and then let the passengers out really quickly, of course. And then the second solution would be that you do depressurize the tube, so actually pressurize it, in order to make the pod decelerate even faster. Then also like let air into the tube and then open the emergency doors for the passengers to get out.
Okay, you mentioned passengers. We actually got a question about Hyperloop and if it could be an alternative for the transport of goods. So that could also.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because Well, as you can imagine, the Hyperloop will be built for the urgent travel. So the seats are reserved for the ones that are in the biggest hurry, either passengers or maybe goods. As you can imagine, just like airplanes, for example, they are really compatible with both like cargo and passengers. You can easily rebuild a pod from the inside to make it feasible for cargo as well. So it's both possible. We think that in the beginning, at the first Hyperloop pods in the real world, will probably be cargo because, as I said, the regulations for passengers to get in the Hyperloop pod will take quite some longer than for cargo to enter it. And then an interesting thought about the cargo. What cargo would it be? If you think of really high urgent cargo, then you might think of organ transplants. As you can imagine, they can be very long outside the body. So what if someone with a really rare blood type in Paris, in a hospital in Paris, has needs an organ transplant, and then in Amsterdam there's someone ready to give that organ. You can take the flight for a couple of hours, and then the organ wouldn't be feasible to like implement it into the body. But if you take the Hyperloop, you'll be there in 30 minutes. So that could be a possible solution as well. For an interim stage, until the passengers are allowed to get on the Hyperloop, then maybe these kinds of things would be applicable in the Hyperloop. Yeah.
Would that also solve some of the political issues that you already mentioned?
Well, the political issues would be more for the building of the tube. So when we're talking about cargo, then the tube would already be built. But the political issues would be mostly about where the tube will be, who pays for the tube, who gets the money out of the profit of the tube.
Okay, so the large initial investment.
Yeah, it is a large initial investment. Yeah, definitely.
I think another technology that requires large initial investments in infrastructure would be hydrogen.
Yeah, and of course, when we were talking about is hydrogen ready to be implemented? Actually, 2 weeks ago, a director from Gasunie came to the parliament, and he said, "Yeah, hydrogen innovation is like a hink, stop, sprong, sprong. So like a tiny step, and then 2 big jumps." And I think we're really just only in the beginning, because to make hydrogen, we need clean electricity, and we are in the easy part of the energy transition. Literally, we are at 20% green electricity. We know how to build windmills. We know how to build solar panels. This is easy. Hydrogen is way more needed in the hard to decarbonize sectors, like industry, like some place in the built environment, like heavy long-haul transport, also airplanes, boats, what we talked about. And yeah, really to actually improve climate. It's the first thing that's needed to really blow up to use hydrogen on a large scale is more green energy. So that's the first step, and of course the infrastructure, because we've got kind of like a chicken and the egg problem, or chicken or the egg problem, that there are companies, and also the big oil companies like Shell, they want to invest in green hydrogen. And you have all these companies that say, okay, I want my logistics and my transport, I want to do it on hydrogen. But the infrastructure isn't there, and it's just too big of a risk. So as Ecorunner, we really think that the governments should say, okay, we take away this risk. We will make sure that the infrastructure is there, and the plans are there, of course, so that companies can take the risk to invest in hydrogen technology. So that's a big step to still.
Yeah, I agree on you to some extent, because I think indeed for the, let's say, industry and also for mobility, we would need another energy carrier. The electricity, which we're now starting to make greener, is only, let's say, 20% of the energy demand worldwide. Most of it is currently just oil and other fossil fuels. And if we look towards hydrogen, indeed, when producing a larger scale, we could drive down the costs, both of producing but also of using hydrogen. But we already see, I think, and it's quite promising, that there are quite some investments in hydrogen. When we look towards, for example, the refueling station in the Netherlands, I think we currently have 6 refueling stations, and in the next half a year we will have 10 more.
Of course,
so
it's growing
we're making big steps currently.
I really agree, and that's why I'm definitely not saying, not at all actually, saying, okay, the infrastructure isn't there, we shouldn't invest, because we need to take these first steps, and we need these pioneers investing in hydrogen, and otherwise we won't ever get there, because we need to get there. We know that for sure. In 2050 we will be carbon neutral as Europe. So we do need the big investments, and it is happening now, and we see it as well in fueling stations, in industry actually, with very cool like steel production in Sweden happening as well, and all kinds of experiments with hydrogen in the built environment, in for example Forze Overflakke, and really cool projects already happening. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, so a lot of innovation happening in the hydrogen sector. I think the solar panels are also improving a lot.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking while we were talking, hey, solar panels, they're already there. You can use them, you can buy them and actually use them to drive your car. There's, like you said, there's quite some development. They also mainly aim at making them also even more sustainable. There are organic solar cells coming up, which is really nice. And actually, they are competing. We are looking for the best solar cells, and we're actually looking into them. And yeah, I think it's a ready solution. Why shouldn't you grab it? And there's already a company doing so. So I think that's a really nice.
Yeah.
Wait, yeah.
I think there is already, indeed, you could say solar panels are already there, so why wouldn't you use them? But I think if you look towards the feasibility, like just practically, it's very hard. It's not exactly so that when the sun shines, you have a demand of electricity, and you need that to match. And if we look towards solar panels already, they're switching off solar fields quite often at areas where we have a lot of solar energy, because solar energy produced is more than the solar energy needed. And I think the solar energy in the long run can only be feasible if you be able to store that energy. And when you think about batteries, like when you think about these huge gigawatt solar parks that they, for example, have in the Middle East, and if they have an overcapacity, they can store that with hydrogen, for example. But without an energy carrier, solar energy would only bring a huge challenge to our energy net, and not provide a lot of solutions, I think.
Actually, I think if you have your solar car, you have the solar cells on your car, so they actually look around. You have already quite a lot of electric cars, and they are familiar. Everyone uses them, and if you put solar cells on top, they charge the whole day through, and you actually just have to you have free energy, and I think why wouldn't that be a solution?
I think that could indeed be a solution, and I think for an electric vehicle especially, you could charge while driving. I think that is a great advantage, but I think when you look towards the efficiency of solar panels, it's of course way more efficient to have many of them in a desert than just one on your car, in terms of cost efficiency, but also in terms of energy efficiency. Because in the desert, the sun always shines, and on your car it doesn't. And the same goes for when you implement something on a large scale. The costs just go down drastically.
Actually, yeah, I think you have to get a little bit also away from solar cells only work when there's sun shining. The sun shines the whole day. You just don't always see it. So, of course, there's more energy coming if you have the sun shining directly. But actually, if you look really into it, the solar cells or you have a higher intensity if you have a small spot, like if you have light clouds actually, and one spot the sun coming through. So it's not only having your solar cells in the Sahara or somewhere where the sun always shines.
But when we look, I think when we look towards the numbers, we can see quite a big difference. Ecorunner already mentioned Professor Ad van Wijk, who is here, a professor at the TU Delft, and he sees that when you have a solar panel in the Netherlands, and when you compare that to a solar panel in the Sahara, it's a factor 3 of difference with the energy that you can can get from the sun. So
Yeah,
I think it's definitely a big difference where
Yeah,
your solar panels are.
Yeah.
And then we haven't even talked about your car being in the garage, because there the sun is really, really low.
Yeah, I agree. But you also have to think you're just a little bit skipping. You still have to get that energy here. And I think, well, if you want to make hydrogen of that, that's, I think, a nice solution. But it's simply not that ready yet, I think. And if you have the solar cells here, you have it directly available. And that's what you need. You want to drive now and not wait until you get it. And it's readily implementable.
We
Yeah, I
actually
think
got
that's an
some
important
questions that tie into this quite nicely now that we're talking numbers. There is a company called Lightyear. They're also they will be here later this event. They have solar panels integrated into the hood and the top of the car. They claim that they don't have to charge the car for 700 kilometers. And a question: what is the maximum range of your car, of the Nuna?
Of our car?
Yes.
Which range do you mean? Basically, we are driving all the way, like the entire day through. Yeah, like if there's day, at night, well, we can drive on the battery, but we won't get anything from the sun. But during the day with our solar car, we can drive all the way through. We don't need to stop.
So
What kind
only
of
for the
power do
drivers.
you get from your from the sun? Can you drive it continuously? Because I can imagine if you drive at a higher power, your battery empties faster.
I don't know exactly the numbers of like which power we have, but yeah, we can definitely. We are usually having an average speed of we drive often at 90 kilometers an hour, but even sometimes above that, 100. Above 100, it's not that efficient anymore. But that also really depends on the kind of motor and motor controller, the electronics behind that you use.
We also got another question a while back already, which is kind of a different take on it, quite interesting. You mentioned there were some huge developments in solar panels for the past couple of years. How can someone buying a solar car, when they're available, how can they ever be sure that there wouldn't be a way more efficient one in 2 months if that development keeps on going on like that?
That way, I think you have to look a bit into the solar cells that will be on your car and the ones that are the best available. Because if the best available are still different than the ones which are the best, because the best, they are in the universities or research centers.
On your car?
Perhaps on our car. But our car is a research project, actually.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way, and to get it all the way to like production in like for the in higher numbers, I think you shouldn't worry about that too much. And in the end, you often see solar parks. They already have been built, and they still produce energy, and a lot of energy. So I think that's not too much to worry about there.
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll learn some more about that from.
I think maybe when you put them on your roof, then I would say definitely get the highest watt peak per solar panel that you can get, because they will lay there for 25 years and you'll actually be stealing from your own wallet, not getting the best you can actually, because they are improving this much. And if you know, today it's easy to get like 400 watt peaks actually per solar panel. And when you're still buying maybe cheaper panels that are more viable today, in the end you will definitely make less money. So I think you should invest, but I think maybe you're thin film solar panels or something.
Yeah, you really have to. There are some different ones. If you look at like expensive or the best, which are the most efficient, are usually gallium arsenide. They're used on space missions often, and like they're the most efficient, but they're really expensive. They're way too expensive
and on
to
the
put on
public
your house.
market, of course. I mean, like when you're mostly when you go to like a solar panel supplier, then you ask, okay, what do I need to get? And they say, okay, we've got these ones and these ones, and one are probably a bit more expensive for your revenue actually. But I think you should always get those, because you will, in 10 years, then you will say, oh man, my panels are too outdated.
I think there if you basically go to your supplier, the one who installs your solar panels, and he has, let's say, 3 to choose from. I think there you can make a really easy calculation. This one costs me that much. I'll pay probably so much for the electricity otherwise. I think you can make that calculation really easily with the percentages you get from
I think we'll hear more about that in the discussion with Lightyear. They've probably thought about this long and hard.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to go on to the next statement. This was kind of a long discussion about one statement. This is one we can perhaps also agree on. There is a future for combustion engines.
I think we've discussed this already. Actually, it's kind of the first statement.
But is there a future, you think? And in what sectors would there still be need for a combustion engine?
Yeah, I think like when you're looking at a really close future, then there might a future, no, because I think in combustion engines you are mostly thinking about burning fossil fuels. Actually, in diesel motors right now, with I believe almost no adaptations, you can burn hydrogen as well, so it's a bit cheaper because you don't have to buy a fuel cell, but it's only a small step. It's like you should definitely just invest in entirely green and efficient energy, and I don't think it has a future.
Now, we already mentioned some hydrogen combustion engines. I think you mentioned that before. Would that be a good thing to do, or?
I wouldn't say so. I think in terms of efficiency, a fuel cell is way more efficient. With combustion, but it's not only less efficient. Also, with hydrogen combustion, you still produce NOx, which is also not good for the environment. So when you think towards moving to a greener future, I think fuel cell technology should be it. Also because it doesn't use any metals that are really bad from an environmentally perspective, and it also doesn't provide you with the gases such as NOx or CO2. So fuel cells currently quite expensive, but costs are going down. We also see already more fuel cell vehicles coming on the roads. Toyota has actually just brought out their new fuel cell car. So I think there's lots of potential there.
Okay. Anybody else? Combustion engines?
No, I don't see a future for combustion engines.
No?
Yeah.
Okay, well, loud and clear.
An easy one.
Okay, the next one then. Mobility companies adapt their current activities to the consequences of the changing mobility sector quickly enough. So, are mobility companies agile enough currently? Should they do more? Maybe Georg, you already mentioned Lightyear. I think that's a mobility company that is definitely adapting to the changing.
Yeah, I think there are definitely a few companies who are adapting or already have adapted to it. And if you look at really big companies, maybe even looking at KLM or automotive, like Forze or Mercedes, they are changing, but they could do so. They are big, so it goes slowly. You have to account for that, but they could go faster. I think they could try a little bit harder even, instead of waiting for, well, let's say government incentives to actually do it. They look on the money, I think.
KLM and Schiphol are looking for Hyperloop opportunities, though. I don't know the exact specification, but they are interested. So.
Okay.
I think as well in the automotive, I like to commit to that as well, because I think actually the big car companies, they are selling more and more electric cars, but they are still not getting to their CO2, like their CO2 goals. And the problem is, as they're selling more electric cars, they're selling more and more SUVs. And they are in this problem like, people want big cars, and I think this really is a problem. It's not only investing in green technology, but it's also what are we doing with this energy. We can do everything on green energy, but we also have to change our behavior. We have to drive more efficient, smaller cars. Actually, the first car, the Ford Model T, and we now have the Ford Focus, for example, and they only made like an efficiency, it's only 2 times more efficient. And that's because the Ford Model T was 500 kilograms, and the Ford Focus is 1600 kilograms. So we see as we get more efficient, we also want more, and we want to use more energy. And of course, energy has all to do with wellness and wellness, welfare, I don't know, well-being, and but I think really this is also where companies should do more and try to really promote more their smaller cars and build down the bigger cars.
I think that's also an important note that we actually should go for.
I think definitely we agree on
I
this,
think the companies, they will sell what they can sell. So that's also big. Of course, it would be nice for them to advertise their smaller or more efficient cars, but it's also left up to us or the people who are buying cars, whatever you want to drive somewhere to.
We had like a couple of years ago, you had the big, like the famous Mitsubishi hybrid car. It was like for Texas, it was ideal if you had your own company, I believe, and it suddenly in 1 year it was like the most sold car in the Netherlands. It was a hybrid car that wasn't even using this much electricity, and it was also it's an SUV. It's a bigger car, so it's really shifting the wrong way. We should really think about both of these things.
Okay, so it's not just about the technology, but also definitely about the behavior of the people using the technology.
Yeah, definitely. But I think with the technology that you use, you can already influence that behavior. And also, the behavior you can't influence directly, but throughout the technology, when you make that, for example, the energy source where you run on a lot cheaper, but also a lot greener, then the same behavior wouldn't be necessarily harmful for the environment. I think we can indeed say that we should maybe use less energy, but if you look towards trade all around the world, it's very it seems that we will also always will need mobility, and when we need this mobility, we need to have a solution for this, and I think that is where hydrogen, for example, comes in.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think I wouldn't necessarily say you have to downscale the behavior, but maybe look into more sustainable ways to provide for that behavior. And that's where Hyperloop comes in as well.
Is that something you are also actively looking into at Hyperloop? How it will influence the travel behavior of people, for instance? Yeah,
we're definitely looking into travel behavior, because also when we want to decide where the first Hyperloop track in Europe, for example, would be, what would be the most economically favorable place to build the pod and the track as well, then you will have to really research the behavior of people and the traffic between Amsterdam and Paris, for example, or Amsterdam and London, or some other places in Europe, to see where the first profitable Hyperloop will be.
Okay.
Do you know yet?
No, well, there's not a clear answer, but we like to focus on Amsterdam, Paris, also because it's in the Netherlands as well. So, yeah.
Don't you think that maybe because Amsterdam, Paris is actually already such a good train connection, that maybe this will also play a role? Like, where are already not the fast, high-speed trains, or do you think it will?
Yeah, well,
eventually trains will get faster and faster, and then it will get a Hyperloop. It will be like the
No, well, that's an interesting as well, but the fast trains are nothing compared to Hyperloop. But you could say, or look at possibilities to implement the Hyperloop on the train track, or above the train track, or maybe instead of the train track, because with train tracks, they are already in of the government. So the government is mostly responsible for the place of the track and the land where the track is on. So that's where the government could play an important role as well.
So the infrastructure would be cheaper then?
Yeah, the initial cost for the government and as well as for the companies would be cheaper if you use the land that is already in possession of the government, for example.
How is it actually for the Hyperloop if you have to make turns also? Because often, the train, or at least the usual trains, not the high-speed trains, they do make turns. How do you solve that actually?
Yeah, well, for Hyperloop, it's really important that you don't have much corners or that sort of stuff. So you might have to look when a train can corner at a certain angle, then maybe the Hyperloop should or decelerate, or maybe use a shorter route to that you don't have to make that corner, so that you don't have the high G-forces on the passengers. So you have to look into that as well. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think like for very specific locations, Hyperloop can be very promising. But if we look towards large scale of mobility, it's also, I think, what we see with trains, for example, now, that they just are just a small fraction of our mobility. And I think especially in the short term, maybe hydrogen planes or other forms of electric vehicles, maybe where you can go really to any destination you want, would maybe be more promising.
Yeah, well, if you look at the plans, or at least the vision of people that are with Hyperloop, you see that it's not only A to B, but also splitting the tube so that you really have a network of Hyperloops in Europe, for example. So it wouldn't be just A to B or one specific place to another specific place. But as I said before, you will not, well, probably will not have very much stops in a Hyperloop track, because it's most efficient when you travel at high speeds.
Yeah, okay, but if you would have this huge infrastructure all around Europe, then we're not talking about 10 years, I guess.
No, I agree. If you want to have it all implemented as a real network, then I wouldn't say 10 years. But the first track, so that is a specific position from A to B, then you could say 10 years. Yeah.
What do you think is the time frame for such a vast network?
Well, I'm not really certain on that, to be honest, but I think if within 10 years the first Hyperloop track is being used, I think many will follow, and it won't take really long. But then again, you have many more countries to also get involved. So especially politically speaking, that will take quite some time, maybe 30 years or something. But that's really a rough estimation.
Yeah, maybe like 20 years or so, because I know, for example, something that's maybe a little bit comparable is the hydrogen network that they're currently building in Europe. They're building a hydrogen backbone, which is basically replacing all the old gas lines. And I think all the major countries in Europe will be connected with these hydrogen backbone by 2040, which is 20 years. And I think for Hyperloop, if we talk about similar infrastructure,
it could be similar. Yeah, sure.
Could also be something like that.
Okay, we've been talking about Europe now. Would you say there's a big difference for the chances of your technology in Europe versus, for instance, very different continents like Africa or Asia, maybe? Maybe, Georg?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, or you also said there's sometimes at different locations more sun than here in the Netherlands, for example. I also said perhaps you can use it for really simple cars. Basically, you have the solar cell wires and your motor. That's a little bit too simplified, of course. But if you keep it simple, you can also use it in really remote locations, and then you don't need to get any fuel or whatever. You just need the sun, and that shines hopefully every day.
Let's hope so.
No, and I think that's one application. You actually see it for planetary space missions. There you have, for example, a Mars rover relying on the solar energy, and you could do the same with the car in really remote locations. And I think also here on for example, here in the Netherlands, I don't know, some people are driving a lot, but most people actually let their car sit most of the time during the day, and only drive to do their groceries and so on, which isn't that far away. And for that, solar cars would be definitely a solution, because you have enough energy. Because
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned very remote locations. Siep, is there a future for hydrogen cars in these remote locations?
A nice question. I think hydrogen for remote locations, of course, you have to still have a place to tank your hydrogen, but definitely for more long haul and long distance transport, hydrogen is nicer because you can actually store a lot of energy in hydrogen in a car. But I think you will have to have a special car because, of course, still like the Toyotas that they're building now, they have a longer. They can drive a long distance without tanking, and they can tank fast. But when you're in the desert, you will still have to tank at some point. So, but I think for hydrogen, really, the entire world is investing in hydrogen. Japan is investing a lot. China is investing a lot. Australia, where of course there's also a lot of sun, is working a lot together with Japan actually to build really on a large scale produce solar energy and make hydrogen with this. And there's really going to be a world economy. And when I was talking about the hink, stop, sprong, then I think that will really be the last big jump. Will be really a world hydrogen economy.
I think actually in this, when you talk about remote areas, hydrogen can especially be very promising because currently in these remote areas they also use the fossil fuels right now, and that's where I think in terms of feasibility, hydrogen is very comparable with, because you can just store it and use it. You can have these hydrogen tanks, for example, at the remote areas. And especially if you look to remote areas, I think you want a long range. That's what hydrogen provides you with. And you want, because you are remote, you want certainty. So for example, before Vattenfall was talking about remote areas. And I think when you talk about the Australian sun, it may be very promising for a solar car, but when you have a day without sun, let's say, and you are in a remote area and your car stops, then you are in a really bad position, I think. So in that case, it would be nice to have or a battery or hydrogen. I think would be better even to store this energy.
I don't quite see that point because, like I said earlier, even if you don't have, if there are clouds, you still have some income, and if it's a remote location, you at least have the sun and you do get some energy out of that. And
yeah, but if we're talking about,
you still need some of your hydrogen coming from. So I think that's not really that comparable.
Don't you think? Because I think when we talk about the sun, you guys race in Australia, which is the place where they have one of the most sun on the earth, actually. And you can drive with a very, very efficient car. You can drive 100 kilometers an hour. So that would make me think that if you would have a less efficient car and a place with less sun, you would drive significantly slower, or not?
Actually, the last team, they set up their world record here in the Netherlands, actually. So they were driving during the day, I think about 10 hours. So they do not only can drive.
What kinds of speeds do we then talk about?
They did. I think they did around the 90 or 100 kilo. No, actually, yeah, around 90 kilometers an hour. I think. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's quite promising. I must say.
Yeah. So
but I think even
you have to get a little bit away from solar cells. They work only in plain sun, in the best sun. You actually get also quite a bit out of them during for us normal conditions.
But do you agree that with this sun you lack a lot of flexibility? So for example, when you want to drive, let's say in Germany on the Autobahn, you come from Germany, I know, then with a solar cell it would be very hard, right?
Well, I think. How do you mean it would be hard?
Well, I mean, like you have a maximum amount of energy, and I think when you look towards your car, of course, which is one person, and also so one person can go 100 kilometers an hour, but if you increase the weight, you of course need more energy. So if you have a big family car, then with the same amount of sun, I can imagine you can drive 100 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, actually, yeah, but then you can jump in and actually fill up the already filled solution. You already have a lot of electric cars. And if you make them solar electric cars, you can actually, drive with your whole family wherever you want to. And I don't know the exact numbers, but I think the light year, you mentioned something like 700 kilometers.
That's
and they,
yeah, was mentioned in the question.
And they are 4-seater or even 5-seater, like the normal sedan.
I think we all agree really that when you drive a normal car, you probably won't get all your energy from the sun. And of course, to say we've got a range of 700 kilometers, I am curious actually which of that range is from the battery and which is from solar energy being produced, but maybe we can ask that later. But
like I say, I don't know exactly the specs of the Lightyear car.
Yeah, we should ask them.
I also want to say, like, I really think it is a smart solution, the sun. I think it's a very, as I said earlier, it's a very efficient way and also green way to generate this energy. But I think it is a very good solution next to another solution. And it especially when you talk about mobility and also about the heavy industry, for example, I think you need an energy carrier. And I think for that, you need or a battery or hydrogen next to these solar panels in order to make these solar panels especially really effective.
Yeah. Okay, so I would actually like to get to the final question we got. Sorry for interrupting you. We've already discussed the impact of changing people's behaviors versus implementing new technologies. We actually got a question. Don't we think that a change in people's mobility behavior is going to make the biggest difference? And how do you think we can combine technological development with a behavioral change? Now, I think that ties in really well with the final statement, which is about the implementation of service versus ownership. And I think maybe Hyperloop. I don't think anyone is going to be owning their own Hyperloop pod anytime soon.
People do have their private jets, so it is possible. But I think, especially because of the whole safety regulations and all the working together of the pods as well as they travel, I think it will be all done by one company or at least one standard, including the government, and then it will probably be a public service. Yeah. So just like maybe airplanes or trains, the usage can be compared with that. Yeah. And
then the other teams, any response to that? How do you see the impact of?
I think really, actually, it's like a beautiful future scenario that they sometimes sketch, in which like mobility as a service, together with autonomous driving, will eventually create a sort of world where we've got an optimal use of all our resources, and in which I will, for example, I will say, okay, I'm going together with you, I'm going to this place. I will just step out of the door. I won't even know how I'm going to, in which vehicle or whatever I'm going to be there. But we are going to be brought there in the most efficient way and in the fastest way. And that's, I think it's a really beautiful scenario. And I think all these technologies will work together in this, and especially with big data and those kinds of beautiful buzzwords. That is going to change a lot. But I think actually in change of mobility, with the well-being increasing, people want to move more. And when China, they say, okay, we also want cars, we also want to move. India is going to be next, Africa is going to be next. So we can change our own traveling behavior, for example. It's a great way to reduce your own impact, but this is a big problem, and it's a very hard one to tackle, because now we've been doing it for so many years, and we'd love to somehow create an environment in which India or Africa or China won't have this much growth in wanting to move themselves, but it's hard to say for us from our golden chairs, I think.
Yeah. So you do believe that we can accommodate all the traveling needs of people in a sustainable way?
We have to. For myself, I can say, okay, I'm not going to use any more airplanes, or I'm going to try to go with the train, or I want to reduce traveling. But we can't point the finger. I can't say this for you. I can't oblige you to do this, but we do have to come up with as much sustainable technical solutions. So by doing it as efficiently as possible, we can actually create an environment where we can just supply mobility. And mobility is a large part of well-being, and especially with sustainable energy being this cheap, I think really those are going to be a beautiful future, and which mobility will also be almost free, and it can be really pretty. But
I do, however, think that it is also possible to change its behavior to some extent, of course. As you say, whenever the demand of electricity increases, you have to provide. But that doesn't say that green as electricity or let's say hydrogen, everything comes at a cost, of course. And I think in terms of behavioral change, especially the government also has a large role, which of course subsidizing or taxing or in that way affecting people's behaviors. I'm myself, I very much prefer indeed that we can travel wherever we want. But I think if we're looking towards a behavioral change, it might be more into the hands of the government, whereas we provide the technologies, that can result in this change.
Yeah. Okay. So I think kind of concluding here, we need the government to help us either with implementing the technology or with changing people's travel behaviors. Technology's kind of ready, almost getting there.
And it starts at the TU Delft with these dream teams and also with people listening, because we've got still so many problems talking about efficiency of making hydrogen, efficiency of solar panels, the sustainability issue about solar panels, but also about fuel cells and rare metals. And there's just still so much innovation that still has to be done. Yeah. And especially from the 50% sustainable energy or the 80% till the 100% sustainable energy. Like those are the really hard to decarbonize sectors. It's going to be a ginormous challenge, but a really cool one. And technical innovation really stands on the.
Yeah, and I want to add to that I think in terms of technology, the technology is ready. We can show we all show actually that the technology works. It just needs to be implemented, and I think when student teams can do it, society should definitely be able to make it happen.
All right. So I think those were the final words. We're on our way. We're not quite there yet, but we definitely have faith in it. And as you said, it all starts here at the TU Delft, I think.
Nice.
So I think that concludes the Dream Team portion of this event. We will now have a 20-minute break. And after the 20-minute break, we will have some companies here. Are they listed here? No, I don't think so. So you will see what companies those are. And I think with that, it's time for the break.
Thanks.